Hi, hello, and welcome to Metatron's Academy. Now, today's video is mostly a video to answer a question that many of you have asked me both on my main channel and here. How many languages do I speak? To cut a long story short, I started learning languages very early. If we look at foreign languages, then yes, in my late teens, I moved to the UK, which is where I picked up my English. But when it comes to learning languages, I'm going to bring up a little bit of a controversial topic here. I'd argue that I started working with other languages, translation and thinking, switching your thoughts as early as when I was born, in the sense that in my household we spoke both standard Italian and Sicilian, because my dad is from the north of Italy and my mum is from Sicily. With that being said, of course, I say that this is a little controversial is because people will tell me, yeah, that doesn't count, Sicilian is a dialect of Italian. Well, first and foremost, whether Sicilian is a dialect of Italian or whether it's an actual dialect of Latin, which is my opinion, depends on your school of thought. Regardless of that, yes, Sicilian is quite close to Italian, although oftentimes not mutually intelligible. But whether we consider it to be a language or a dialect, well, it's just a matter of nomenclature. Social linguistics does not matter when we're talking about the development of the memory-related and language-related pathways in your brain. In other words, I'd argue that if you're used to saying the same thing with different words, you're already creating pathways in your brain, in your synapses, that can be utilized again as you approach the study of foreign languages because you're already malleable. Regardless of that, as I came back to Italy from England already being relatively fluent in English, I decided, you know what, I want to pick up more languages, and that's when I started my university career and I majored in Japanese with a minor in Mandarin Chinese. I, of course, have spent 4 years in Japan, but any other language that you will see mentioned on this video, I just studied for personal interest and, honestly, for fun. Now, let me continue with a little demonstration B-roll, and after this is done, we'll talk about why I specifically chose these languages, and last but not least, we'll ask another controversial question. Am I a polyglot?
Lorica quan hiquidemus veruad modum speciosast, neque enim accurate verisimilen lorica segmentata reprae sentat. Eandem difficultatem percipimus in Gale iscutisque, quae nimis parva sunt. Fortassis artis causa, quam obre non recte de picta sint suspicor, esse propter magnitudinem. Siren Neutrons Ration というホラーゲームを遊んでみたいと思います。サイレンはホラーゲームの中で私の一番好きなゲームとなっておりますので本当に楽しみにしています。そして10年ぶりですから懐かしいですけれども実は何も覚えてません。記憶喪失ですよ。
各位好，我是梅塔特龙。荣耀战魂是我的最喜欢的电子游戏，很好玩。最初阵营包括骑士、日本武士，还有北京人，但是现在也有中国的武林，我觉得非常好。
Avant de commencer, je voudrais vous présenter un brève remarque. Je vous présente mes excuses pour mon français, parce que bon, je ne suis pas français, je suis italien, et je sais bien que quand je parle français, je fais des erreurs. De plus, c'est la première fois que je fais une vidéo en français. Et normalement, sur ma chaîne, je fais vidéo en anglais. En fait, vous pouvez trouver une vidéo similaire à propos du homme en anglais ici.
Stinaifioti iellada itan horismenis e poliscrati, cate policratos iheton dicotis strato. Ioplites itan polites que stratiotes, tinidias tirmi ton poleon kraton. Eline strategii εκπαίδευαν πολεμιστές να πολεμούν σε σειρές, όμο με όμο. Με αυτόν τον τρόπο κάθε άνδρας προστατευόταν από την ασπίδα του άνδρα δίπλα του. Αυτό το σύστημα λεγόταν φάλαγγα.
Guardare, tagliare, soldi, piccioli, ragazzo, pecciuatto, lavoro, travaglio. Sì, se, attento, ancora. Lorica e laminae sunt in nexae fiibulis ori calci, ansis aeneis lorisque scorteis. Mea versio quam hiquidetis cupro puro utitur ad innexus laminarum corporis, atque ori calco ad humeros et laminas pectoris. Pondus universe a septem ad novem kiliogrammata soletesse. Lorica certo mutata ad ipsum militem, lorica e forma sinit militi, magna facultatem se movendi. この人は何している？偶然ではなさそうですね。看護婦。包丁を持った看護婦。優しい。優しい。ここは、この部屋は焼却炉ですね。ここには鍵があるはずです。 と待ってください。あ、ありました。
Fabriquer une armure est une opération très difficile, est une révolution technique, mais aussi une révolution dans notre manière de voir, c'est-à-dire de penser la guerre. À la fin du XIIe siècle, le casque conique à nasal était remplacé par le homme. Le homme est un casque de cavalerie emblématique de la chevalerie. Le homme est très célèbre et connu, par exemple, parce qu'il était utilisé aussi dans les chevaliers de l'ordre du Temple. En fait, ma reproduction ici est un homme templière. On a la croix ici. Et c'est un symbole.
各位好，我是梅塔特龙。今天我们一起学中国的朝代史。汉朝是中国历史第时代第2个王朝，在中国历史发展中占有独特而重要的地位。
僕の一番好きなレベルです。病院。終了条件、災害委員からの脱出。はい、わかりました。よし、こちらはベラちゃんです。このゲームの囚人キャラクターの唯一の子供です。並びに10歳の女の子でアメリカ人です。今は日本の病院の中にいて、この病院から逃げる必要がありますで、彼女の後ろに窓がありますが、この窓から逃げられません。ということで、正面にあるドアを開けるしかないですね。怖いですけど。
Per favore, per favore. Di dove sei? Runnese. Aqua paiteane.
Όπως έχετε καταλάβει, σήμερα μιλάω ελληνικά και ο λόγος γι' αυτό είναι επειδή θέλω να μιλήσω για τους Έλληνες οπλίτες και την ίδια στιγμή θέλω να δώσω έναν φόρο τιμής στους Έλληνες subscribers. Εκτός από τα αγγλικά που είναι η βασική γλώσσα στο κανάλι μου, μπορείτε επίσης να βρείτε βίντεο στα αγγλικά, ιαπωνικά και κινέζικα. Οπότε, αν θέλετε να με ακούσετε να μιλάω αυτές τις γλώσσες, μπορείτε να κάνετε κλικ στα links στο τέλος του βίντεο.
Eandem difficultatem percipimus in Gale iscutisque, quae nimis parvasunt, portassis artis causa, quam obre non recte de picta sint suspicor, esse propter magnitudinem. Ut exemplum den, scutum, quicque quod singula militum operiat. Crassitudo laminarum ferrearum prorsus variabilis est in ipsa lorica, a septem decimis partibus millimetrorum ad 3 millimetra, spississimis vero laminis sumerorum, quae pars nimirum, fortissimast.
今天我们一起学中国历史。我要讲的是越王勾践剑。这把剑很漂亮，很特殊，很有名。我觉得很有意思的话题。
Οι οπλίτες ήταν βαριά θωρακισμένοι και φορούσαν χάλκινα κράνη, θώρακες και περικνημίδες. Στο αριστερό χέρι κρατούσαν μια σπίδα και είχαν ένα σπαθί και ένα δίμετρο δόρυ. Οι Έλληνες οπλίτες ήταν καλύτεροι μαχητές στο μεσογειακό κόσμο.
まあでも死人はすごく面白いと思います。興味深いです。詳しくはわからないんですけど、私はある程度までこのゲームのストーリーを勉強しました。で、彼らには呪いみたいなものがかかっています。で、死人は死に絶えて生前の仕事を繰り返す状態です。永遠に仕事する。地獄だね。Duoque genera habemus, alterum veterius, alterum moderniusculum, ac multiplexius. Fieri quidem potesteam esse inter primas formas prototypicas. Forma corbridge pro clausurae mechanica ratione lororum scorteorum cum hamis metallicis, probabiliter visa est firmior. Typus A, lora scortea servat ad colligendas laminas pectorales ad reliquam loricam, dum typus B, utitur hamis metallicis, ceuhic in mea versione verisimili potestis videre, quae est corbridge typus B. E quadraginta laminis constata ec forma, apparatus collaris et umerorum constituerunt, e viginti quatuor laminis, et cingulo sedecin laminae. Fragmenta forma eniusted qua imputeo principiorum a edifici inventa sunt, in oppidoniusted in Caledonia. Iterum nobis monstrant pauxillo mutatam formam, iam numero segmentatorum minore. Ultimo quidem maximo.
我每天看中文电影看1个小时，复习课文，预习生词，或者做练习。有时候上网跟朋友聊天儿。我的朋友是北京人。我去过中国，我觉得中国很美。我去过北京，但是明年我会去上海。
Quand on pense à la guerre, souvent on pense que faire la guerre, ça veut dire porter un coup par l'ennemi. Mais se défendre du combat est aussi très important, peut-être la plus importante chose. Le homme désignait l'armure de tête. Il protège toute la tête. Et ça, c'est la différence avec, par exemple, les casques coniques ou les casques romains. Les améliorations successives du casque consisteront à couvrir de plus en plus le visage, rendant difficile l'identification de son propriétaire. C'est peut-être l'origine de l'héraldique, la science des blasons.
Oggi studieremo una delle civiltà più importanti della storia dell'umanità, il cui pensiero, cultura e arte sono capaci di ammaliare la mente. Osserveremo l'enigmatica scrittura geroglifica, le imperscrutabili meraviglie architettoniche e cercheremo di dare forma agli dei delle lande della sabbia eterna, entità plurimillenarie come Amon, Anubis e Osiride, figure recondite e affascinanti. Questa è la storia dell'antico Egitto e delle sue misteriose divinità.
Okay, well, I hope that you enjoyed that little compilation. Of course, I don't claim to be perfect in any of these languages, but I think I've reached a reasonable level in the sense that I can express myself and sort of translate my thoughts into the language that I wish to use for communication. And usually I'm pretty fast and I don't have to stop and think for too long. And I have a reasonable vocabulary in the majority of the languages I speak, although I do have to say that I don't speak them all at the same level. Now, why did I choose these languages specifically? Well, first and foremost, because these were the languages of the cultures that I liked the most. When I was a teenager, I really wanted to learn English. I thought it was a great language. I'm like, wow, if I learn English, I could speak and communicate with so many people. I loved the way it sounded, both from a British perspective, from an American perspective, Kiwi, Aussie, any accent really. I just liked them all. Upper class all the way down to Cockney. Regardless of that, it was great for a career path, which was my initial intention. I wanted to become an English teacher, which I will eventually have become. I had no idea about YouTube, of course, but then again, I think that the fact that I started learning English very early on put me in a position where I could eventually also open a YouTube channel using English, which was great. My passion for Japan started when I was 14, honestly just because I liked video games with Samurai and Street Fighter. But after coming back from England, I needed to decide a university path, and instead of just doing English and French or Spanish and English, I decided, you know what, I'm fascinated by Japanese. Why don't I just try and learn Japanese? If I can master it, that could put me in a position where I won't have too much competition in the realm of simultaneous translation or even like moving there. And, you know, if I'm fluent, it might be easier for me to get a job if I don't have too many people that are as fluent as me. That's why I started picking up Japanese, but the reason why I added Mandarin as a minor is because I remember attending one Mandarin lesson and I was like, wow, this sounds so cool. The tone and language, it's a challenge, and I love challenges. I really like the idea of, everyone says this is one of the hardest languages in the world, then I'm gonna tackle it. But the other reason is also because I had a musical upbringing. I studied the piano for 10 years, and I will talk about whether musical training can help a language learning and how it does on a dedicated video on this platform. But I think I had a very musical ear, and for me the tones were never a problem, in the sense that I picked up the tones within about 2 weeks to a point where they weren't perfect, because it needs time, particularly to work on the third tone in Mandarin Chinese. That took me years, but in a couple of weeks, or as they say in Britain, in a fortnight, I already brought my tone, pronunciation and pitches to the point that it could be understood easily by the Chinese. So that's why I decided to go for Mandarin. I thought I was in a position where I could do it, because I didn't have a barrier when it came to understanding how the tones functioned, and I'm like, why not? French it's another one that is kind of interesting. The reason why I studied French was because first I have a cousin from Paris, so we could use a little French when we were younger, and my mum speaks some French. Also, once again, is another language I love the sound of, although to be frank with you, there aren't many languages I don't like. Also, when I was living in England at one point, I remember that I had a roommate from Paris once again, and then at that time we used to spend a lot of time within the African French-speaking community. We had a lot of friends. We would just go, sit down, have a chat, talk, eat together, watch TV, and all of that was done in French. So it was a way for me to passively learn it, and then I, kept on going just on my own for fun. Now, modern Greek is probably the language I speak the least. I'm mostly interested in it because I love ancient Greek history. So you could say, why didn't you pick up ancient Greek then? Because it's like Egyptian. I did take a few classes of Egyptian, but the problem is that languages that we don't 100% know how they sounded, which I understand that with ancient Egyptian we really have no idea how they pronounce the vowels, whereas when it comes to ancient Greek at least there is some reconstructed pronunciation. But I like communicating with languages, so that's why even my Latin, it's not conversational. Yeah, on that video it is, but I worked on that video, like there's a lot of memorization when it comes to that. I'm not conversational in Latin like a Luca Ranieri from Polymathy would be. But yeah, I think my Latin is alright. It's just that I usually prefer to spend more time onto the languages that I can use for communication than on the languages that I just use for personal fascination and study. With that being said, I did spend quite a bit of time on my Latin, but I did give a little priority to modern Greek simply because I thought, hey, if I run into a Greek person, I could say something. Kalispera. Sas Efaristopoli. Efcharisto. But as you can see, I did spend some time in Latin, particularly the pronunciation is what I'm most versed in, so I can explain and back up historically a lot of the pronunciation that I use when I use reconstructed classical pronunciation. So I'd say that my strong point in Latin is pronunciation. My least strong point is probably vocabulary, because I really need to extend it beyond what has to do with ancient Rome. Now, when it comes to the last controversial question, am I a polyglot? Well, to answer this, I think I need to dive into what a polyglot is, possibly also talk about all the fake polyglots and how a polyglot is defined and how people slap that title onto themselves before I can answer whether I am a polyglot or not. But to do that, I need a dedicated video, as you'll surely understand. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for your time and for supporting and joining Metatron's Academy.